Welcome into another episode of Pawd Slama Jama here on the Pawd Slama Jama YouTube channel. Before we get into any talk, I'd like to thank each and every single one of you guys that took the time to click this video or are listening on our audio only platforms. If you are new to the YouTube channel here on Pawd Slama Jama, make sure that you subscribe. That's the easiest way to help us out. Hit the subscribe button as you see on the bottom of the video. Be sure to give this video a like and comment on it. Be a part of the discussion. We want to hear what your thoughts are, and what the topic that we're going to be talking about on today's episode is Cougars men's basketball offseason talk. The season just ended a couple weeks ago for the University of Houston Cougars men's basketball team, but it's already all gears shifted towards the 2024-25 season. And obviously we're coming off the day after the UConn Huskies were named. They flat out won the domination in the national championship game. And quite frankly, what they have done in the NCAA tournament and for the entire season, the past 2 years, they've just had a dominant run. So all steam ahead, looking forward. And obviously here from the Houston Cougars perspective, they're looking to build, and hopefully this time next year, they're the ones that are celebrating cutting down the nets after winning a national championship. That's what the goal is now. Joining me for this episode of Pawd Slama Jama, Dunlap. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing well. Ready to kind of look forward now that the NCAA season is over. UConn, like you just mentioned, are the champions back to back. Congratulations to them. They definitely were dominant, had an impressive run throughout this tournament, really throughout the last 2 years. But I'm excited for what's to come for Houston. I think going next season, it's a lot of excitement, especially with the recent announcement of two players coming back. And so one of the few times that Coach Sampson won't have to replace four starters coming into a season.
Yeah, he can't bring out that cool throughout the course of next season. But obviously, what you're alluding to, Dayon, two big names coming back. And the big domino fell yesterday evening, Monday. We're recording this on a Tuesday evening, but on Monday evening, Juwan Roberts, Houston Cougars forward, announced on his social media pages that he was going to be coming back for his 6th year of eligibility. He's using his COVID year of eligibility. Obviously, he redshirted the first year that he was here way back in the 2019-20 season, and he was given that extra year during the COVID year in 2019-20. Obviously, that season was cut short, so he's going to be back leading the front court. If you watch the last Let's Rage Cougs episode that we had following Houston's loss to Duke, that was actually something that Chris Gardner brought up, and lo and behold, Juwan Roberts is coming back. And on Tuesday around noontime, Juwan Roberts spoke with media, with reporters, and at the same time, LJ Cryer made the announcement. He posted on his social media pages that he would also be coming back for the 2024-25 season for the Houston Cougars, which is obviously really big news. Like Dayon just touched on, two starters from this past year's team that made it to the Sweet 16, and not only two starters, but two very important pieces to the puzzle that was for the Houston Cougars in 23-24. When you talk about LJ Cryer, obviously he was the leading scorer for the Cougars this past season with 15.5 points a game. And then Juwan Roberts, the steady veteran who's led the team in rebounding this past year. He's just been around the Houston Cougars program for so long. He's kind of become a staple to the Cougars, and he's going to be a big presence from a veteran leadership standpoint. And kudos to him, because he's going to be anchoring the front court. It's going to be two positions that the Houston Cougars don't have to worry about, and they'll really come back. They'll be a veteran team once again in 24-25.
Yeah, and starting with J1, like you just said, he's bringing back leadership, and he's seen it all, and he's almost done it all, from a Final Four to Elite Eight to Sweet 16s. And so the experience that he brings, not only within the culture and all what he brings on the court as well, is even more important. Starting with his rebounding and his toughness. I think when you think Houston basketball, you think toughness and defense, and he epitomizes toughness, defense, and rebounding. Those things, some of the things that you think about when you mention Houston, and that's what he excels in. Now I'm looking forward to him to take that next step throughout all the season. In our Let's Race Cool shows, we kind of was looking forward to him taking the mid-range jumper, and eventually Coach Keller said he was expecting him coming into a season take some corner threes. Didn't see any of that, and so I'm gonna see throughout this offseason and coming into next season, he continues to work because he's been putting in the work with Coach Kellen at practices. Will he have the confidence enough to start taking that mid range and then maybe eventually take some threes? But other than that, I think he showed development throughout last season, ability to go finish with his right hand over his left shoulder, aside of just going and finishing with his left hand. And so I love what I've seen of him. I love what he brings. I'm happy that he's coming back. And LJ, I mean, I love the way he finished the season. Primarily when we got to conference play, he was up and down a lot in regards to shooting, like all shooters are. They're streaky, and so his jumper wasn't always falling. Sometimes he wouldn't have an impact offensively, but I love what he brought defensively, his effort, and when the team needed him the most, he stepped up. And that's what I'm going to appreciate the most. I know in those situations, he's going to be ready to step up if his number's called, and if he needs to do a little more than what he really specializes in. And so I'm looking forward to him to develop even more coming into next season. Because what we know with this program, they're going to develop your weaknesses and make you a better, well-rounded basketball player. So I'm expecting him, LJ, to come and be even more lethal off the bounce instead of just being a catch and shoot specialist.
Yeah, real quickly before we get into Crier, Jawan Roberts, you mentioned something you talked about just a second ago, toughness. There's nothing more that showcases his toughness this whole season. He was playing with some form of injury when it started with his knee, the issues that he was having all season long where it had to deal with swelling. He constantly had to have his knee drained at the beginning of the season towards the end of the season. Had suffered a gash on his hand, which required stitches in game at Oklahoma, returned to that game, made the NCAA tournament run. He was dealing with all kinds of issues and still managed a way to go through and finish the season for Houston in a year that, like we saw that last Duke game, it just seemed like from an injury standpoint, Houston was just not so much snake bitten in this season, but Jawan was just battling through. And then obviously you touched on the opportunity for this will be his final year, no matter what, after the season to showcase some extra versatility. And like we saw in that Duke game, once Jamal Shead went down with his rolled ankle, the Houston Cougars really started playing through him a lot when it came to trying to score in the post. And again, he was banged up. He was dealing with issues himself. So he has a whole off season. Hopefully he can get 100% healthy. And if he is, he'll be a key focal point again next season to the Houston Cougars offense. We obviously seen multiple times that Houston likes to start games off by feeding the post. And more often than not this past season, it was Jawan Roberts who got the things rolling offensively for the Houston Cougars. And like you mentioned about LJ Crier, obviously a big piece of the puzzle for the Houston Cougars next season. He's just going to be another veteran leader. It's going to be a second year under the Houston Cougars system under playing for head coach Kelvin Sampson. So he's not going to have that adjustment period. I do want to point out something that Crier told Chris Gardner and some of the local Houston media this afternoon when they spoke, but Chris told us how LJ Crier is going to have surgery tomorrow. So Wednesday, April 10th, on his left foot, which according to Chris, Crier said that's something that had been bothering him for a while to end the season. And he said that the timetable is 10 to 12 weeks, which if we look at it, the short timetable of 10 weeks, that will put him around mid-June. If we go the full 12 weeks, that'll put him in mid-July, or not mid-July, it'll put him at the very beginning of July. So hopefully that's something that LJ Crier is able to take care of, and that's something that we didn't hear during the season, but something that required surgery, obviously something that was hampering him. Like you mentioned, he had a couple of inconsistent stretches to end the season. Potentially that could have been a factor, and hopefully he gets that taken care of.
Yeah, we never heard a peep from him or about it throughout the whole year, and that shows to his toughness and how tough he is mentally, not only physically. And so, I'm glad he's coming back. Now I'm looking for him to take the next step. Now he has another year with his coaching staff, with his program. And speaking of, I mean, we got a clip from Coach Sampson last media availability last week when he kind of hinted at and said himself that he knows who's coming back. He kind of let's hear from the chief.
So I know who we need, so I don't get my information from anyone. I am the information. It's like trying to keep up with the Joneses. We ain't trying to keep up with the Joneses. We are the Joneses. So in terms of attacking the portal, I haven't attacked the portal. Like last year, I got asked stuff about this guy and that guy. My response is usually, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. So for me, we may add, obviously we're going to add a point guard. We had we add another guy if we see fit. You always throw a worm on the hook and throw it out there, see what bites. And I think the most important thing for
So once again, that was Houston Cougars head coach Kelvin Sampson. Like Dayon said, that's what he told local medias on a Zoom call the past week here on the opening week of April. So now that time has passed, we know that LJ Cryer and Jawan Roberts are the two key returners so far, which are key pivotal pieces. And now, obviously, the big question mark for the Houston Cougars, the big question mark for Houston will be who does it get to play point guard. Obviously, when it comes to the stellar play that Jamal Shead has had at that position for the last several seasons. Let's start with the conversation on the assumption that he indeed keeps his name in the NBA draft and he chooses to go the pro route, does not return for Houston, and assume that there is a new face at the point guard position leading the Cougars next season. I think it's going to be really helpful, and quite frankly, it might go a little under the radar to have LJ Cryer in the backcourt because he is going to be kind of like that veteran. Like I said, he'd been under the Kelvin Sampson system already a year, and he's going to be able to provide a lot of feedback, a lot of advice to whoever, again, under the assumption that Jamal Shead does not come back, for whoever is playing point guard for Houston, and he'll be a go-to player that person can go to and really get a crash course under playing for Kelvin Sampson.
Yeah, and I think it'll be twofold. I think he'll be able to have two perspectives, not only what it's like to be in the Houston culture, but what it's like transferring into the Houston culture.
Mm-hmm.
So not only that, those two things, but also with all of his basketball experience, as well as Emmanuel Sharp, who's been now, it will be 3 seasons next year once they add a point guard. And so having that experience with you, with whoever the new point guard is in the backcourt, I think it's going to help them tremendously. And I think it's going to make the transition really smooth. But the question is, who will it be? It seems as if Coach Sampson and staff, we saw Fran Fraschilla send out a crooked tweet that rumblings that they already know who it is. It just hasn't been announced yet. And we got a clip from Coach Sampson where he actually talks about a point guard for next year as well.
Today.
Is that person in the portal?
Yes.
What's your timetable for making that decision?
Whenever I make it. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this there, KG. We're gonna have a good point guard next year. For being a point guard in our program, two of the things that I look for is just things that we'd all want from our children. To be a good person. I think it's important. If you're a low character dude, we're not going to bring a low character dude in here because our culture is too important. We're not going to bring anybody who's going to screw the culture up. Immaturity is important. Being able to handle adversity is part of both of those. Galen.
So once again, that was Houston Cougars head coach Kelvin Sampson. I'm on what it takes to play point guard for him. And to add on to what you said, Dayon, about Fraschilla tweeting out a cryptic post about the Houston Cougars and having the point guard of the future, whoever that is, it's going to be it seems like for him, he has really sold on whoever that guy is and is going to be able to step right in, be a good fit, and lead the Houston Cougars to, at least according to that tweet, be another top 5 team this season. And you heard Kelvin Sampson there touch on. He promised Chris that whoever it is going to be someone really good. And then he touched on some of the qualities. And I didn't go too much in depth, but I think the biggest thing that he said, obviously in that clip, but he said over the course of a multitude of seasons, it starts with fit. And for Kelvin Sampson, it starts with having the right attitude. Like you said, maturity is a big thing, a big key component. And it is such a pivotal position because, like Sampson has described that position before, specifically when he's talking about Shed, that position, whoever's playing it, has to be kind of an extension on the court for at least half of the game whenever the Cougars are on the opposite side from the Houston bench in the first half. And it's the point guard's responsibility to relay all the messages, relay all the calls that Kelvin Sampson wants. So that person, it has to be someone that Kelvin Sampson has an enormous amount of trust on to be that leader in the first half and over the course of the entire season. We know there's 3 players that Kelvin Sampson always said, there's 3 people that can never have a bad practice. Starts with the head coach, then it's the best player, and of course it's the point guard. So a key, crucial position for the Houston Cougars.
And I'm glad you just said that, because all that you mentioned when it comes to game will be learned in practice, and the trust and all of that, whoever that point guard is going to be, is have to earn that in practice. And one thing that Coach Sampson referenced in that mid availability was he talked about the growing, how the point guard is going to grow within the culture and within the system, and how Galen grew from his freshman to sophomore year, Dejan and Jamal. And so I'm wondering whom they're recruiting or already evaluated within the portal. Is it going to be someone that's maybe coming in a sophomore, is going to have 2 to 3 years, maybe 2 to 3 or however many years of availability left, and have a chance to grow within the point guard? Or will it be someone who has experience within college basketball and be like a senior or a junior or a senior or something like that? And so those are the kind of questions that I'm wondering, which route will they go? I have no doubt that they're going to identify a specific type of point guard, in which primarily it's a pass first point guard. That's their type of point guards, that they're like traditional point guards with different skill sets, from Galen to Dejan and Jamal, all 3 different. But one thing they have in common is they're all pass first point guards, and they all really excel in pick and roll, and they know how to control the pace of the game. And so I think that those are characteristics in regards to basketball, in regards to offense, is what they're going to be looking to bring in. And so I don't know. You think it's going to be maybe someone who has coming in will be a sophomore and have 2 to 3 years left? What are your thoughts?
Based on just the history of the last couple of seasons of what Houston has done, I would tend to lean that whatever person they bring in, if he indeed is a transfer, would be on the older side, a junior, senior, potentially maybe even has 1 extra year of eligibility, maybe had redshirt a year. But I tend to believe it has to be, and it starts with that comment that Kelvin said about maturity. And to me, obviously, it could be someone that maybe they recruited over the high school process, chose to go to another school, didn't work out. And maybe he's a sophomore in that aspect. But I think when it comes to maturity, that's something that has to be showcased. There has to be some track record about it. And I think that's why, at least for me, I tend to lean that it would be some older player, maybe a junior, a senior, and I would be much more surprised if he was a little on the younger side, just because of that maturity comment aspect. But it all comes down to evaluation.
I agree with you, but also at the same time, like you just mentioned, it could be someone that they recruited maybe before in high school. And he talks a lot about character and maturity also alludes into the type of character. With the basketball aspect of it, I feel like they can teach and they can learn, regardless if it's 1 or 2 or 2 or 3 years. But I agree with you. That's what it kind of makes me question, because the maturity aspect, I'm thinking more of character versus experience when it comes to like basketball. But at the same time, I see the viewpoint of recent and most of the transfers they brought in, they maybe had 1 year or 2 year extra year or something like that. And so I could see that as well because of their hint at someone who was known within the college basketball, it seems like, and when they're named, they know they're good power guard. So I can't wait. I can't wait to see.
Yeah, just look at some of the transfers in the last handful of seasons going back to 21, 22.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that whole transfer class had 1 year, and then they moved on, and Josh Carlton, Tajay Moore, Kyler Edwards, and then even look at this past season, obviously LJ Quire and Damian Dunn, those were two much older players that if it wasn't for COVID, they would only have had 1 year of eligibility, and they would have to move on. And even the year before that, when Marcus and Jarris were on the team, obviously Malik Wilson was a transfer. He had redshirted before he came from Texas Tech, so he had been around the college landscape for a while. So I think track record wise, it tends to lead.
He's another player that's coming back that we haven't mentioned.
Malik Wilson told John Rothstein that he plans to return to Houston next season and use his additional year of eligibility. So that right there, that's a big key component who obviously we saw this past season played some big minutes for Houston as a combo guard stretch and was instrumental.
Especially after
Terrence fell down. Yep, and you could tell that he definitely earned Kelvin Sampson's trust. He earned Kelvin Sampson's just from the time where he was at the beginning of the season, didn't necessarily have a set rotation piece, and by the end of the season, he had a consistent role, and you could tell that the coaching staff and Kelvin Sampson specifically had a lot of confidence in him. I'm curious. Looking ahead, we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit, but would he be that backup point guard role? And I feel he's much more of a combo guard, and we know that what he brings to the table is defense. He played phenomenal defense down the stretch for Houston, and at the end of Big 12 play into the Big 12 tournament and into the NCAA tournament. He rebounds the ball really well. That's something that he picked up down the stretch. Now, some of what I'm about to say is that it's obvious because Jamal Shead was 1 for 1. He was one of a kind. But there was a notable difference when it came to Jamal Shead coming out and to when Malik Wilson had to run the offense. What are your thoughts? Is he a true backup point guard, or could you see him coming back to be much more of a combo guard, have him play alongside LJ Quire and whoever that point guard is they bring? Is he a slotted backup point guard, or maybe is he more of a potentially 2 this season? What say you? That's what I'm asking.
He is a combo guard. I think. Yeah, I always keep in mind the track record of not only the players that come through the program, but the coaching staff. And I expect them to not only, like I mentioned with J1 and LJ, to now work with him and have game film with him in Houston uniform to be able to teach him what they need from him and him to be able to learn it and translate it and get better coming into next year. And so I think he can take the next step and be counted on even more as a ball handler if need be, or I think LJ can be in that role. And so I think it's a game-to-game situation, but I trust that the staff, and I think he will be able to take that next step and have more confidence in himself, more confidence, and just more comfortable. He'd be more comfortable in the in his system to be able to run the offense and to be himself within it and do what the teams needs, because he has that experience. And so I think having him is a good piece. He's a utility player that he can run the point and also he can play off ball. But now I think he knows what will earn him minutes. That's the important thing that he learned this season, and I think that he will not only sharpen all those skills and get better in that, but now all the additional things that I just mentioned, he'll work on that, and that can get him even more playing time on the court. And so I like the addition of Malik Wilson as well. He has experience. I mean, you look at the champs, Newton. He's been in college basketball 5 years now. Came over from East Carolina, and so you need guards with experience.
No, that's a great point. That the phrase that you said, he learned how to earn minutes this season. Yep. It's absolutely 100% too, and that's a great point. And then even when you look at the new additions, even some of the players that were on the team this year and didn't play because they redshirted, Cordell Jefferson's gonna come into the fold. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to get into rotational minutes, and obviously the big headliners when it comes to their freshman class. When it comes to Mercy Miller, that's the name that comes off the list first and foremost. It'll be interesting to see how he's into the fold, but because obviously he's not a point guard either. He's a shooting guard. He's another guard that could come in here and add to the mix. I'll be curious to see if he's able to earn minutes, or if we see what we kind of saw with Cordell. I know Cordell was an exception because he just had completely was injured. Yeah. So it wouldn't make sense for him to play. I don't even know how many minutes he would have gotten as he was healthy, and maybe it might have been a plan to redshirt the whole year. But it'll be interesting to see how those players come into the fold with Houston next season.
Yeah, it will. I mean, they're going to be too deep pretty much at every guard spot, at every spot. I mean, throughout the floor. And that's what I'm looking to see. I mean, coming back, I mean, kind of, I don't know if we want to kind of go forward and kind of talk about Terrence and JoJo now, because those are the other two players, particularly Terrence, when we reference the conversation that we're talking in regards to guards. He's also going to be in that mix of guards. And so, and I expect Terrence to probably take the biggest step. I think it's coming up that time to where it's time for him to really showcase all the potential and live up. I don't want to say to the hype, because I don't really like that the way the sound phrase. Of it. I just don't the phrase. I don't really like that phrase, but I would say just live up to the potential and the expectations within himself and the expectations within the program for him and be with Houston. I think it's time for him to do that. And I think Coach Sam, we got a clip with Coach Sampson. We'll mention it. We want to go to that clip now?
Yeah, let's go ahead and play it.
All right.
I was disappointed with obviously at the time was Terrence because of the way he was playing. You know, I was watching him in practice, and there's always a point in practice where you can see it's not necessarily an aha moment where here he's getting it. I just could see improvement. He was delivering the first blow in a lot of our actions, whether it was rebounding, defense, blocking shots, getting in the paint, making plays for each other. I was seeing things I hadn't seen, and I was excited about the next month for him. And then, 2 days later, his season ends with a torn Achilles tendon. When we lost JoJo, that was a double gut punch because there was a lot of nights our best big was JoJo. Some nights it was Juan, some nights it was Jay, but a lot of nights it was also JoJo. And when he went about.
So once again, that was Houston Cougars head coach Kelvin Sampson touching on two key players that obviously went down with injuries over the course of the 23-24 year. Let's focus on Terrence, as we were talking about him right before we went to that clip. Obviously, he's recovering from his ruptured Achilles injury that he suffered at the end of the year, the calendar year in 2023, in December at the Toyota Center when they were playing Texas A&M in the neutral site outing. But based on that clip right there from Kelvin Sampson, he mentioned how that was the biggest injury that affected in terms of, for lack of a better phrase, a punch in the gut because of what potentially was down the road, what potentially could have been right around the corner had Terrence Arsenal not gotten injured. And it kind of going back to what you said about Malik Wilson, where you mentioned he learned how to earn minutes. Terrence could very well have been heading down that path where he unlocks essentially being able to be a consistent player that Kelvin Sampson, the trust just continues to go up and up and up. And for the past 2 seasons, or I guess for the past season and a half that he had played, we always would see it in flashes. Like think back to last season at Oregon, what he proved he was able to do in a hostile environment. And he always had the intangibles. He always had the assets, which just start with how lengthy he is, how really he has all the tools to be able to be an elite defender, and the offensive skill set. We see it every day during practice, and we saw, like I said, in flashes of what he's capable of doing. It was just a matter of being able to put it all together, and that injury really robbed him of potentially going on a stretch similar to Malik Wilson that got him those minutes. And it'll be interesting to see how his season goes based on the Achilles. It'd be interesting to see if he's ready to go from day one of the season, or if maybe they kind of ease him back. By the time the regular season starts, it would be November, so it'd be close to the full year. I'm curious to see where he might be at, because haven't had any specific timetables, but I would imagine he would be limited for any off-season work in the summer.
Yeah, and probably, and I have to say that even within that, one thing that he will be able to do is work on that jump shot.
Yeah,
we know the intangible of what he's bringing, and like Malik, he was on a stretch. I haven't even looked at the number of games, but I remember those at least 3 or 4 games. He was at least minimum 6 or 7 rebounds per game, and he was, like you said, on his role, like Coach Sampson just referenced, to kind of turning that corner and being an impact player like they know he can be. And so I have the expectations that the cultural things, he's going to do that, because that's what he does naturally with his length and his athleticism. But I think offensively, that's why I'm looking for him to take the next step, be a more consistent jump shooter, and then being aggressive and assertive offensively overall. Because I look at him, and he's within that Kawhi Leonard, Kobe Bryant, traditional 2-guard, 3-guard. Or a wing, and now they don't really call it have a position. It's pretty much a wing, and can pretty much do all things and guard pretty much all positions 1 through 4. And so I can't wait. Like you said, I expect for them to kind of ease him back. If he can't do any off-season work in regards to conditioning, they definitely will ease it back, because you know how important conditioning is, especially with the playing style, how Houston plays. And so offensively, overall, I'm looking forward to Terrence and him getting better and taking that next step.
Yeah, to your point that you mentioned, in 3 out of the final 4 full games that Terrence Arsenal played, he had 9 or more rebounds in those outings. Beginning on November 24th against Montana, he had 9 rebounds. Didn't get a single rebound against Xavier in that Big 12, Big East, in that Big East, Big 12 battle. And then against Rice, he had 9 rebounds. Against Jackson State, he had 10 rebounds. And then obviously he ended up going down the following game against Texas A&M. So to your point, yeah, he definitely had showed he unlocked that potential, or at least he was on his way to being that consistent when it came to those really impressive rebounding numbers on a consistent basis.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and I think I know that he could do that, and he knows, like, he's been within the culture now 2 years, and now it'll be his 3rd next year. I wonder if he'll have the medical red shirt to be technically a redshirt sophomore. I'm not sure the time, but I'm sure they'll apply for it. But if so, he will have the experience within the culture. But now it's just expanding his game and being a well-rounded basketball player, being versatile, being able to catch and shoot. And not only that, being able to attack and beat your man one-on-one and expand mismatch. I think he could be a player that can unlock mismatch, especially with his length and his athleticism, be able to shoot over smaller guards. And if he's at the 4, be able to take bigger and slower players who maybe not as quick and doesn't have the athleticism or agility that he has.
That's a great point that you bring up, and I'm looking it up now to make sure that I remember correctly. But I believe that the medical redshirt for NCAA basketball is if they play for a third of the season. Let me see.
Because I remember, didn't Tremont get it?
they cannot participate in more than 30% of the season's games. So Terrence played in 11 games. Houston went 32-5, so they played 37 games. So 11 out of 37. That's less than a third, but let me check. Dang, he's right under it. He played in 29%, 29.72% of Houston's games. So I guess technically for that aspect, he could qualify. He obviously suffered a season-ending injury, and obviously it did occur before the halfway point for the Houston Cougars. So we'll see. That's going to be something to potentially keep an eye on. That's a great point, Dayon. I guess under those circumstances, he would be eligible. He meets our criteria, at least in terms of him obviously suffering the season-ending injury, and he only played in 11 out of Houston's 37 games that they ended up participating in. So we'll see. And I mean, something that maybe potentially comes to play a factor down the line. The other player that Kelvin Sampson mentioned in that clip, JoJo Tugler, who was from the freshman, he showed big potential this season. So, I mean, as a freshman, he would have his highs and lows, but when he would have those highs, they were really impressive, and they showed. And I think what puts so much, or should add much more excitement for Houston, is just at times there's a lot of room for him to grow, but at times it's just natural to him when it comes to some of his abilities in the post. It seems like he's just naturally gifted in terms of being able to react in different and be a playmaker down there in the post, which isn't always the case. Sometimes it takes a while for players, and specifically bigs, to adjust. And from a defensive standpoint, there will obviously be games where he would have freshman moments in terms of fouling and getting into foul trouble early. We know that he brought a lot of rebounding to the table, but second year for Houston, similar to like we touched on with a lot of these players that went through their first year with Houston, whether it be a transfer or them being freshmen, he's going to know what to expect. He's going to be obviously working with strength and conditioning coach Alan Bishop. He's going to, body-wise, is going to be in a better position, and he could be someone that is a force to be reckoned with by the time Houston gets towards the end of the season and they're aiming and preparing to make another NCAA run.
I think so. I think he has a lot of development to do. I think, like you said, it starts with getting in the weight room. But just watching his game and thinking about the year before him, he made the same next level defensive plays that Jarris made. Shot blocks and rebounding and just coming out of nowhere and being able to make some of the plays that he did. JoJo made some of those same exact plays, and you can see it. I think the difference between them two is where Jarris is light years ahead of him offensively and more complete of an offensive player and more versatile. And so I think that's the next step for JoJo. And I think Coach Sampson and staff recruit these type of players purposely because of they want to develop them. That's part of getting them to come to the program versus, and you hear one of the caveats that they lean on is one of not having players within their rotation leave the program. But because if you're getting playing time, they are going to focus and allow you to develop within that program. And I think JoJo is going to be one of the big cases that can come and show his development. And by the time he leaves Houston, he could be a first-round draft pick. He has that type of potential. But next year, I think get in the weight room, be more consistent offensively. And like you said, also defensively in learning the game. And at times early in the season, it seemed the speed, he would be running so fast and just have some touch fouls or just not some smart fouls. And I think once he learns the college game even more, continues to develop overall with his game, I think he could be even more versatile. He already showed the confidence. If you give him a wide open three, he at least will take it. We saw that, and I love that from him. That shows the confidence that I've been working on this. So you gonna give it to me, I'm gonna take it. So that mindset, just as a hooper, I love that. So that lets me know that he gonna keep putting in the work, and he's gonna be willing to have a face-up game, jabs there, and shoot that mid-range, and eventually catch it and stretch it out from the three. But overall, he has the ability to be a first-round draft pick. And I think next year he can be a potential most improved player, and probably even making an all-conference team or at least sixth man of the year if he's the first to come off the bench. Or depending on how the lineup works out, you never know.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the other aspects with Juwan Roberts coming back. Takes away a lot of pressure for JoJo Tugler to have to take that next step.
Yes.
Because
So yes.
he can kind of slow down. He can go at his own pace, and I mean, he broke a bone in his foot. It's not like that's an easy thing to come back from either. So, we're really. It's not even a great comparison. It's not apples to apples, but it kind of reminds me of Caleb Mills his freshman year, where obviously he performed well. He was a great. He put a lot of positive things for Houston his freshman year. And that following season, there was a lot of expectations for him. Oh, he's going to take that next step. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be one of the next great players. And for whatever reason, it just didn't work out that way. That pressure is off JoJo Tugler because Juwan Roberts is going to be back.
Great point.
And had Roberts chosen to not come back, then it's no question that JoJo Tugler would have been expected to be slotted into that starting role, barring a transfer had they added alongside Javier Francis. And again, there's a lot of things that he's coming back from. Had he seen some slippage, or I mean, again, they're all human. It's not necessarily as big of a leap as some might expect. They'll be like, whoa, what's going on with JoJo Tugler? That's not going to be the case this season.
That's a great point. And I think that's an important point for JoJo to be able to be patient in his development and being happy with where he is currently and enjoy the process. He seems like a kid that wills. He seems like a young man that wants to get better. And so that's a great point. He'll have another year to play with J1, to learn from him, under him, and just continue to work day in, day out. And I think that will benefit him in the long run, like you mentioned. That was a great point.
And obviously, that's not even factoring Jacob McFarland, who was another player that redshirted for Houston this season. So he obviously spent a year under the program, being able to practice against the front court that's going to be coming back in Javier Francis, JoJo Tugler, and Juwan Roberts. So it'll be interesting to see how it gets added into the fold, because you'd imagine they won't redshirt him again. So it'll be interesting to see what assets he brings to the table this season.
Yeah, because most of the time, JoJo will go in as the backup five and play alongside J1. And so I think with another offseason to allow JoJo to develop even more, they'll have to trust for him to come in, maybe, I don't know, to maybe come in at that fourth spot. And will McFarland come in and get some of those 5 minutes, or will it be JoJo coming in at the five? We don't know how to play out, because Terrence was coming in the first guard off the bench. It was primarily at that four spot, and when they were going to four guards to allow J1 to get some rest, JoJo will be at the five, and they'll have the lineup. So who knows? The roster isn't complete right now, and so we're just kind of projecting. But it's going to be something to watch. It's definitely going to be something to watch, his development and the different lineups that Houston plays. And like we just said earlier in this show, they're going to be too deep pretty much at every single position. And so some of the guard spots 3 deep.
Yeah. That's the big thing right there. I think what we can both agree on, regardless of what happens between now and that first, whenever they open that season in November, it's going to be that they're going to have a really good roster, like you mentioned, a lot of depth across all the positions. The big kind of final piece of the puzzle to put together is who will be that point guard. And we'd imagine that it's going to be announced, whoever it is, sooner rather than later. So it'll be fascinating to see how the Houston Cougars roster looks for the 24-25 season as they continue to, once again, they're at this point, they have one goal in mind, and that is to win that big elusive national championship on that Monday in April. That's really the last thing that they have left to accomplish. They've won conference titles. They've won regular season conference titles. They've made it to the Sweet 16. What is it now? 5 straight appearances to the Sweet 16. They've won a regional final, or they've won a region in 2021 when they made it to the Final Four. So it's just a matter of getting that big one, and they'll certainly have the talent. They'll have the pieces to do it. It'll just be a matter of putting it together, and hopefully they have much better health fortune this coming season and are able to, at the end of the day, you just hope if you have all your full chips on the table, go out there and let the cards play out how they may. That was not what Houston was able to do this season because they didn't have the full deck of cards. They were missing, and obviously at the very end, their most important player fell, and that really derailed any opportunity that the Houston Cougars had. And they were still so close to make it that much more painful.
Yeah, but like we're talking about the depth. Hopefully, the injury bug stays away from Houston this season. And throughout the different years, the basketball gods just hasn't blessed Houston. I think that's pretty much what it is, in my opinion. The fate hasn't been in our favor, but I like the way it's headed. I like the consistency. I will acknowledge the consistency, and I will celebrate it. But I'm waiting on that 92. But with the depth and with the players that they have coming in, the trust and Coach Sampson and staff to evaluate and identify a point guard, they haven't haven't missed on any yet so far. And so I don't expect them to start. And I expect that player to be just as good as advertised. And I expect Houston to continue to roll.
Most definitely. So we will see. We will continue to keep monitoring to see what news break when it comes to, again, whoever that point guard will be for the Houston Cougars. Pretty soon we'll be starting to focus on the football season as well. The spring game is this Saturday, April 13th. So go out for the spring game and see what Willie Fritz is about. I haven't had a chance to interact with Willie Fritz or go to a practice in person. So I'm looking forward to see what the spring game is about. But from the clips that we've seen online, new energy, top to bottom. Dan, you've gotten the emails how many open practices that they have. 2 hours. They let the media see 2 hours. Back then, they only had like three max, maybe 4, and it was 30 minutes of practice. It was mostly watching them warm up. So night and day difference just in that aspect. So there's a new energy on the gridiron, and hopefully that translates to a much more successful season in the second year of the Big 12 for the Houston Cougars football program.
I'm excited about the new brain trust in the football program, Coach Fritz, and the energy that he's bringing, how he's welcoming local media. I mean, these are partnerships that you build, and he's building that, I believe, the right way. And you have a track record of building football programs. And I've been watching the videos that they're putting out. It seems like the competitiveness is there. I love how the players compete. And I'm excited to see the product that they put out. I love how they're using the spring game the right way and not just shunning upon it. And so I'm excited to see them go out and compete. I think it's an audition for all players. Like he said, all positions are open right now. And I want to see them use this and come out and compete and show what they look to be this upcoming year.
The fortune seems to be shining on the Houston football team. Sunny and perfect weather for football Saturday morning. So already a night and day difference from last year when a storm forced the cancellation of the spring football game, and they were unable to reschedule it. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Pawd Slama Jama. We thank each and every single one of you guys that took the time out of your day to watch us, whether it be on the Pawd Slama Jama YouTube channel, or if you're listening to us on our audio-only platforms. Once again, if you are on the YouTube channel, we'd like to encourage you guys to hit the subscribe button, give this video a like, and comment. What do you guys think about the Houston Cougars depth? Who do you think should be the next point guard? We heard Kelvin Sampson say what qualities he's looking for. Who do you think fits that description? We didn't necessarily talk about who potentially could be a fit in this episode, but we'd like to hear who you think would be a right fit. And like I said, we're going to be monitoring to see who that next point guard is. And make sure you follow us, because there will be some Houston Cougars football coverage this coming Saturday about that spring game. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. My name's Andy Yanez. You can follow me on Twitter at Yanez_5. And Dayon, I'll toss it over to you. Where can people find you, and any closing thoughts?
You can find me on all social media platforms at Dayon Dunlap. Be sure to follow our social media accounts at Pawd Slama Jama. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And as always, go Cougs.